Ladies and gentlemen, hello. My name is Tim Schafer, and I'm in control of the auditorium. Thank you for coming. We're all going to come out on stage, but we're a little shy, so we're just trying to get up the urge to come out, the nerve to come out and see you. Thanks for coming. Before we come out, though, we're going to start with a quick, about 8-minute video from Two Player Productions with some behind-the-scenes look at the making of Grim Fandango Remastered. So sit back and relax and enjoy this, and we'll be out soon.
Grim Fandango.
I was really nervous going down to LA for the announcement because I was like, you know, those big platform-specific press conferences are so big and loud, and the stadiums are huge, and the games are always like, arrow through the neck, stab, and explosions, and these big blah things. I hate thinking about an adventure game being stuck in the middle of that because adventure games are so paced so slowly. It's hard to imagine them kind of competing with all that noise. And then they announced it. We had all Peter Chan's art all over the boards, and it was beautiful. And then everyone cheered, and it was such relief. And glad that people were really interested in seeing it, playing it again. We had the Sony conference. We made our Grim announcement. Zeitgeist was announced, and it was very exciting, and everyone cheered. You could see that we got a really great response from the people there.
It made me feel good. Like, you know, I care about the preservation of this game. It was cool to see that other people do, too. Prior to that, we were, you know, doing all of the planning that we could do in terms of, like, talking about the approach that we would take and trying to get all our ducks in a row about, like, you know, what kind of features we'd want to add and what it would mean to remaster it and all that kind of stuff. We're incorporating point-and-click controls, which I was really skeptical of. Like, I didn't know how the game would hold up, but we got in touch with Toby, who did a mod of Grim Fandango, to add point-and-click controls to Residual.
The fans have really allowed this game to live on beyond the release, and they've put a lot of hard work into the game, and it's really quality stuff, too. And so, you know, where we've found the opportunity to reach out to some of these fans and hopefully to get them involved, and it allows us to do things that were maybe outside the scope of what we originally had planned to do.
So I've looked a little bit at what you did and how you annotated each...
Oh God, everyone looked at my horrible source code.
Just a bit. But I was curious about some of the things you just touched on with regards to, like, when you tell Manny to walk to a specific region, but the point where you define the hotspot and he needs to walk to actually trigger the camera transition isn't even on camera at the current time? Like, did you author specific points for him to walk to on the walk planes?
And he's been gracious enough to help us integrate that work that he did into our remastering. So
we're still in a kind of research mode now, where we're trying to find, and just doing the kind of archaeology we need to do to, like, dig up and find all the source material we can before we know entirely what's possible. And so we'll hopefully be able to figure that out soon and make some announcements more detailed later, but we don't have any specifics to announce right now. But it'll look better. I'll say that. It's going to look better.
But we'll see what they're able to sort of dig up from the archives.
What if we don't get the source assets?
Trying to clean up dithering is like trying to clean up JPEG artifacting, and it's kind of hard. I mean, maybe you could remove some stuff, but it gets really tricky.
Yeah, so let's start by just showing off the game that we have so far.
All right. Well, here is the first time, perhaps, for many of you to see Grim Fandango running on the PS4. We've been hard at work, and let's launch it.
Our focus at this point in development is primarily on getting the game ported to as many different platforms as possible. And we're also preserving the ability to run the game using the original assets and rendering techniques and stuff. So we're working on getting the classic software renderer that the game uses up and running on all of our target platforms.
Yeah, you can see that this is really old and compressed using a super low resolution codec, which is something that we're hoping to fix in the remaster. And here we are in Manny's office with DualShock 4 controls.
So you actually smoothed out some of the collision for the character movement, too?
Yeah, so the old joystick controls that shipped in the original game weren't really up to snuff for modern standards, so we've done some improvements.
We want to improve everything we can about how the characters look and are rendered. We don't want to really crack into reauthoring anything, because we want it to be done with respect to how the original artist made it. You know, Peter Chan's storyboards were authored to be a certain aspect ratio, and so I really want to keep it to that aspect ratio, but just have it look as good as we can make it look. Which I think Wes Anderson has made that cool again, right?
I personally feel like Grim Fandango coming out on the PlayStation 4 is kind of like getting a Blu-ray copy of Casablanca or something like that, right? And it's like you want the work to be as well presented and as well mastered as possible for this like, new higher quality format, but you want the work to be the work.
So what can we expect from the new renderer?
Well, it's going to be running at 1080p. All of the 3D models are going to look a lot nicer. Per pixel lighting, potentially some additional post-process effects. Because right now we're working off the original game files, which of course were really small and compressed for systems of their time. It still kind of depends on whether or not we get those original assets.
But we actually have, this has everything that the archives had on it. So this little solid-state hard drive has, I think the images were, it was probably 130 discs, like CD images. This little hard drive has everything that Lucas still had in storage for Grim Fandango. Yeah, it's exciting to dig through all of this stuff just because I care a lot about the game and I know a lot about the game, but I mostly know a lot about the end product that finally shipped. And so being able to, dig through all the source materials and get some insight into the development is obviously a pretty awesome position to be in. So like if we just look at the compressed original cutscene, you can see there's a lot of, fidelity issues and just like the quality of these lines here. There are a lot of artifacts from the video compression, and there's all this color banding in the sections here. This is a 16-bit color cutscene, and so anytime there's a nice smooth gradient, you're going to lose a lot of that detail, and it's going to kind of wash out. But then if we look at video exported from the original renders, the colors are better, the lines are crisper. There's none of that banding that we were seeing earlier. The whole thing is just, it reads a lot more clean and is, exactly what the artist was looking at when they originally exported this cutscene. It looks a ton nicer, doesn't it? Yeah. But yeah, this is really promising because what this means is that we have basically everything that we need for sure to remaster all of the cutscenes in the game, which makes it is like one of the places where the game is most obviously sort of dated by the technology of the era. And so being able to up-res that and make those come through really cleanly is going to be really nice and help bring it in line with the improvements that we're making to the real-time render. Yeah, there's a lot of exciting stuff in here.
Hello, PAX. How's everyone doing? Right on. My name is Gio Corsi, and I'm the Director of Third-Party Production for Sony PlayStation, and I'm really happy to be involved with this project. And I have the distinct pleasure of moderating this panel today, and I'm going to introduce the panelists right now. First off, a man who needs no introduction. He was the project lead for the original game and now President and CEO of Double Fine. Ladies and gentlemen, Tim Schafer. Next up, we have the original composer from Grim Fandango. A big round of applause for Pete McConnell. Next up, the original concept artist for Grim Fandango and the man whose art you saw splashed all over those E3 screens, Peter Chan. Last but not least, one of the guys who's making this whole thing happen, ladies and gentlemen, the executive producer for Grim Fandango Remastered at Double Fine, Matt Hansen. So,
Hello, thanks for coming.
Grim Fandango, 15 years later. How does it feel being on stage talking about this game?
That's a kind of interesting question. You know, when we made that game, we put everything we had into it, and it was kind of exhausting. And I remember the day we signed off on it, like, okay, it's ready to ship. I walked out of the building, and I went home, and I took like 3 months off and didn't talk to anybody because I was just like completely drained. And then we started moving on to other things, and it started Double Fine, and it was the kind of thing that we just kind of put everything we had into it and then never looked back at it. And so just this coming up recently has made us kind of really revisit a lot of kind of fun memories. All the bad memories have been forgotten. Right? We agreed not to bring up any bad memories, you guys. So yeah, it's mostly like it's fun to go back to that place, and it means a lot that people wanted it to come back, because you know, back in those days there was much less feedback directly from the community.
Sure.
You'd release a game and you'd get reviews and stuff, but there wasn't as much people talking about. Like nowadays, you get, for better or for worse, instant feedback on everything you do. So we were like, I think people liked it. I don't know, but it's just been very rewarding that people wanted it to come back.
Yeah. The two Petes, how does it feel? I mean, it's probably been a little different for you, coming here and seeing all this amazing fan love and having, you know, signing posters on the show floor here at PAX. And what does it feel like?
Well, it's definitely a cliche to say, but of course, if you told me this 15 years ago, when I was lying on, you were talking about relaxing after the game was done, lying on a picnic table in the middle of open space near where I live, staring up at the sky for 2 hours because I was totally exhausted. If you told me then that 15 years from now, you're going to be, you know, they're going to re-release this game, you're going to be talking about this to a whole ton of people, I just would have, it's unbelievable. It's awesome.
I've been waiting for this day. For a long time. It's amazing. I mean, there's just so much love going around. And I think when we were doing it over, Tim and I were in our mid-20s when we made it, and it was it was fantastic to. I mean, I really loved this game, and then for this to happen again, I was just waiting for it to happen because I think it should be a film or a short film. That would be. I would love to work on that.
Film is dead.
I would love it. Just kidding. So no, it's great. It's great to be here. Great. You guys are awesome.
I mean, you guys are awesome. The biggest surprise is that we're not having this meeting. I assume 15 years from now we'd be having it in the Grim Fandango theme park. It was built around the enormous industry that was spawned by Grim Fandango, but maybe in 15 more years.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe. And Matt, what about you? Obviously, you weren't part of the original team who did the original game, but now you're working on the team bringing the remastered game. What's it feel like seeing all this love for a classic and now having it being remastered?
I was 20 years old when the game came out, and it's hard to make you guys feel old. But just pleasure to, I mean, I can't believe I'm working with my heroes, basically. Working on the game that I love so much and having an opportunity to, you know, bring it to a new audience, it's really an honor.
How do you feel that this audience is basically yours to lose? It's really no pressure or anything, but it's just all up to you to keep this going. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. That was a joke. Just kidding.
So that video that we watched touched on it a little bit, but obviously this is going to be the remastered version of Grim Fandango. Let's talk about what quote-unquote remastered actually means and what you guys are doing for it.
Yeah, I mean, we touched on it a little bit in the video. I mean, I think some people, when they heard, they were saying we're remaking it, like starting from scratch, and I think that would be an interesting project to do, but if we're going to start from scratch, there's probably another version of the game we could make. This was about making Grim Fandango the original, the way that it was intended, like just making the presentation amazing, you know, and bringing it back. Because the main thing was that people couldn't play it. It really quickly was unavailable. You know, it was a disc-based game. It wasn't online, and it was really hard for people to play it within like about 5 years. And you find, you know, we made it on 386s, and a week after we shipped, 486s came out and broke a lot of the puzzles in the game. So it's just really hard to keep that game up and going. And I really wanted people to play it again. And then if they were going to play it again, I wanted to be
have it look amazing and sound amazing and control amazing. And can you say control amazing? I want to control amazing. And I wanted us to be the people who were involved in doing it and not have someone who, because there's a lot of stuff that we know about, there's a lot of stuff that the team knows about the game that nobody else knows because it was just kind of, personal memories of like, just little examples, like when we're looking at a texture and someone wants to know, like, what is that symbol on that character's hat? And no one knows, and we got to find the original person who made it. So just having it be remastered by people who were involved in the original game is really, really important. That's all I'll say.
Matt, anything to add?
I mean, we've kind of got all the huge fans of Grim Fandango at the studio together and, created this super team of fans to, really do justice. And we know what we'd want as fans, and we want to bring that to the game as much as we can. So, and it's super exciting to see it come along and to hear the stories that were kind of untold up until now about the development of the game and like all the love that went into every asset, and bringing that to people who maybe haven't played it before because they wouldn't able to. So, it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, it's a much different process now than it was 15 years ago when we were making games. Now you have two-player productions making, work in progress videos showing how everything's done. Those get released online. There's Twitter, there's social. Back in the day, there was none of that.
Yeah, now no matter what we look like, we get filmed and put up on the screen.
You look good.
Good hair day, bad hair day. Thank you.
You look fantastic. Don't worry about it. Yeah.
Space, I forgot to mention we are adding RTS elements to the game. That was one thing I forgot to mention.
Perfect.
I wanted to get that out of the way now so no one's surprised when it comes out.
Can you talk a little bit about what else you're adding to the game?
Me?
Yeah.
Me?
All three of you, or all four of you.
We're focusing on, like we said in the video, digging through and finding original source material so that we can show it uncompressed and unadulterated by what we had to do at the time just to fit it through the tiny screen that we had at the time. So we're finding all that source material, and also when we release it, we see it as kind of like the Criterion edition of the game with a lot of special features and things of interest to people who want to know about the making of the game and hear from old timers like those guys and me. Yeah.
Anything you old timers want to add?
What's that?
Anything you old timers want to add?
I came back to help with the key art just recently because you need it for the cover, right? For the game cover. And so for me, coming back and you saw the artwork. Those are all old school illustrations, and
way before Peter learned how to draw, right?
And it was great to come back and make time for it, and to get out my illustration board and get out the pencils and compose something for the reveal. And but the best part was I now had a soundtrack to listen to in the studio, and I just put it on shuffle, and I had it as inspiration and played it in the background so I can really get back into it. And what came out of it was this nostalgic feeling that I was having and remembering, because I don't know if you guys know, but I didn't make this game in California like these guys did. I quit LucasArts and went freelance, and I moved to San Juan Island, so I'm local. I caught the ferry over here today. So I designed Grim from the island, and FedEx my drawings down to these guys every Thursday, so
like
we can pitch it every Friday. And so for me, it was great. It brought back memories of when Tim and Pete Sakel would come and visit me on the island, and we would hash things out and draw together and work together. And yeah, it was very nostalgic for me.
Yeah. And speaking of the soundtrack, Peter, there's some exciting, fun things we could do.
Nice segue.
Grim was
like that segue.
Grim is a very, very special project to me, and it was an incredible opportunity for me at the time, because I was a huge fan of swing from the 30s and 40s. And I mean, even when we were doing Day of the Tentacle, I don't know if you know this, Tim, but I actually wrote a theme for Grim while we were doing Great Day of the Tentacle.
What?
Like, yeah, someday we're going to need a gangster theme. I wrote Swanky Man.
Which song? Oh, that, really?
So I was
so glad I came to this panel.
I just felt like I was made. I just felt like I was made, you know, to do the project. And there were other things that it came out just at a time when the San Francisco swing scene was really, really hot. And there were all these great players. And we got to use these wonderful players on the soundtrack. And so it was this incredible opportunity to do really live music, you know, improvisation, stuff that you just did not at the time associate with game music at all. And so it was kind of in many ways kind of like a perfect storm for me as a project. But there was one thing that was pretty imperfect about it, and that was we never even conceived of the possibility at the time that some of the more cinematic tracks, the more orchestral tracks, might be done by a live orchestra. But I'm happy to say that we are going to be able to do a lot of those tracks with a live orchestra. So, extremely psyched about that. I don't know if some of you might be Broken Age backers in here.
Thanks for backing.
Well, we had a tremendous opportunity to work with the Melbourne Symphony for Broken Age, and we have now got that opportunity to work with them again for the remastering of Grim. So we're extremely excited about that.
Awesome.
Yeah,
it's great. Yeah. That's really, really cool.
Yeah, those people were. If you watch the Double Fine Adventure documentary, we go down to Melbourne and record. It was one of my favorite scenes. You get to see Peter bobbing his head and listening to the music over Skype or something like that.
Yeah,
but it was
Skype.
Yeah. Watching that live orchestra play those pieces that are so amazing is really fun. And it was nice that it just turned out like the director or one of the people at Melbourne Symphony Orchestra was like an adventure game fan. Right?
And a backer.
And a backer.
Yeah.
Which is nice. Very
Friends
convenient.
everywhere.
He was in that small category where the reward was you get to deliver a symphony to us. Limit one backer.
You know, and the funny thing is too, because it was actually the whole reason that I was in touch with him in the first place was that he'd asked me to do some Grim Fandango music. So I actually did.
For what? For something
Melbourne
else?
Symphony.
I see.
So actually, he called me up in the first place to do a suite of Grim Fandango music, and it came up from that he was interested in doing.
What's that guy's name?
It's Andrew Pogson, awesome guy. We have him to thank.
Yes.
Very heartily for the opportunity to work with these amazing musicians.
And we wanted to have an excuse to go down to Melbourne again because they have really good coffee, right? And other things good about Melbourne.
Can I just ask the crowd, how many people in this audience have actually played the original Grim Fandango?
Hey.
Very cool.
Wait, are you going to ask the other question?
You go ahead.
How many people have never played Grim Fandango in your life? I'd love to see that too. Oh, great. Yeah. See? We're counting on both of you to make this work, to tell you the truth. I think we need all of you to make people who love the old one to tell the other people about it, and people who are interested enough because they've never seen a thing.
Absolutely. So that just begs the question then. So everybody here, everyone excited for Grim Fandango Remastered? It's a gimme, but I had to ask. Yeah. That's cool.
That's awesome. And that's a good reminder for us not to spoil the ending while we're talking about it.
Absolutely. Peter, let's talk a little bit about Peter Chan. Let's talk a little bit about working abroad on the original game. As you were living up here, the team was working down in California. You know, obviously the information superhighway was not what it is now.
That is correct.
You were with us for a little while. at the start of the project, right?
Yeah. What happened was, I put in my notice a year in advance, and I knew that I was going to find a replacement and finish my project that I was working on at the time, and we were tidying up Full Throttle or something, and then Grim started coming up the pipeline, and but it was time for me to leave, and I decided that they knew that my heart was in the right place. They knew I still wanted to work on Tim's next game, so we worked out a deal where I would be the freelance, their first like long distance freelance guy, and then they would supply me my first year of work as a freelancer. So it was a really nice deal. And what's nice about this particular project for me, when you concept design a film or a game, you know, I do this thing where this analogy of designing around a horse arena. If you're ever familiar around horses, you train in a horse arena, and I have fence posts that I have to set before I put up the fence. And so those posts are really important. Those are my guidelines, those are my invisible boundaries that I have to set up. And what's nice about Tim was that when Grim was, when we were talking about it, he had these really solid fence posts for me. So it was, you know, Day of the Dead folklore, you know, film noir, a little Rat Fink kind of muscle car culture, right? And so that's already a nice foundation for me. But then I added Aztec and Mayan culture into it rather than Mexican because that was already too familiar, and I wanted it to make it a little bit different. And then I added a little Terry Gilliam kind of Brazil technology into it, and added some Art Deco, of course, and so that created my fence post, and then I added the fence around it. That way, I can have creative freedom within that space, right? I don't go outside it. So whatever I design within that space will work and live together really well. And so for me to have Tim's trust, and for me to just blast every week, I had to do something like 7 drawings and a finished illustration piece by Friday. So you can imagine that was a lot of work for me. So basically everything that you see, any concept art, I'm winging it. There's no revision. That is like one pass on each drawing is figuring out what that room is going to look like, what that puzzle is going to look like, because I didn't have time to do revisions. So basically I was just winging it. And it was great. I really loved this project. And I also had an ulterior motive as well, because I always wanted to do film work. And so I just made myself pretend that Grim was a film, and that's why the illustrations were so tight, right?
Instead of like, good enough for games.
So then I could take, see, I'm always one step ahead. So then I use those drawings to later, after the game was released, I would use it to, you know, get some film work. And,
nice.
and at the time, thanks to Grim, I almost worked on Tim Burton's Superman that didn't made, that got shelved.
And now we're going to show you some slides from Tim Burton's.
And then after that, it was Lemony Snicket that Grim actually helped me get into that.
One big portfolio reel.
It was.
For Peter.
It was.
Happy to help. Happy to help.
Yeah. So that's my story.
That time was really fun because Peter Sakel, the lead artist, and I were in San Francisco. We're in Marin, and it was so exciting because every like Friday or so we would get this big FedEx, like a big thing where they had the new Chans in it, and we'd rip it open, and there'd always be a bunch of markers which would show these crazy designs, marker drawings, and then one really worked up like pencil, like fine pencil piece. And a couple of them right now are touring in the the Game Masters show that started in Acme in Melbourne. That's why I knew about the Melbourne coffee. And they're like traveling around with that. With that museum piece, but it was just so fun to rip those open and get. It was like subscribing to this crazy high-end magazine of illustration that you'd get, and it was just so fun because it was a scary time. Because I remember I felt so comfortable making games and knowing the art would be great after working with Peter on starting on Monkey 2 and then Day of the Tentacle and Full Throttle. Just like okay, the art's taken care of, Peter's taking care of it. And then this is the first time we ever did a 3D game, and I was like, felt so out of my element. I was like, I don't know, how are we gonna who am I gonna lean on to make sure the 3D art is great? And I think just having these amazing drawings, because Peter's a really thorough thinker about these things. He thinks about like, where do these characters go to the bathroom? That's what they're like.
It's true, I do ask him
here's this room, okay, the character's in this room, but I don't know, the first thing I gotta figure out is where do they go to the bathroom, and then what do they do? And this is the character, yeah.
That's true,
So
because you gotta make it believable, right?
And then that's something a 3D artist can actually look at and actually build from. So that was really helpful as we went into that new world of 3D art, which was really scary for me. Very trendy at the time. 3D is very hot. I think that fad is over now, right? I mean, thank God.
But what I appreciated was that I after I sent it off, I really believed in the art department. The guys were just so incredibly talented because imagine I'm on the island doing my drawings and then they belong to me while they're on my drafting table. And then as soon as I put it in that package and send it off, it doesn't belong to me anymore. And it's like, you know,
George Lucas.
just like send it to this black hole and you don't know. Yeah, to George. So basically, what I love is that these guys took it a step further, right? Because basically my drawings are just a springboard. And I love that, that I'm able to just like let them run with the ideas. I want them to add their 2 cents into my drawings because I want them to feel like they have something to say, that they feel good about themselves when they go home. And, you know, the textures, the colors, I mean, I was just doing black and white. So then when I finally saw the finished work with the music and with everything, it was like fantastic. It was beyond what I had imagined, right? And so I was very fortunate that we had such an incredible art department that I trusted my drawings with.
And Mr. McConnell, you didn't get to go to an island, did you? You had to stay in the basement of LucasArts, right?
Oh, no, it was called the sound department. It did resemble a basement, though, yeah. I used to take those black and white, I had those black and whites pinned up all over my office while I was working on that. I love the analogy of fence posts. When Tim first talked to me about the score, he gave me some inspiration, and one of them was this very unusual collection of vinyl recordings of Mexican folk music, which is called son.
Yeah.
It was called very, you know, extremely indigenous stuff, unlike anything I'd ever heard. And he also gave me his collection of, well, 3 of the great bogey movies of all time, which I probably watched about 50 times a piece. And like years later, Tim was like, "Do you still have my bogey movies?"
You still do have them.
No, I don't. I gave them back, I think. I don't. I didn't give them back? Oh, anyway. So I really like them. So that sort of prompted me to call up a guy at Warner Chapel down in LA who curates the Hollywood film scores. And I was able to get some original copies, I guess that's sort of an oxymoron, but copies of the scores from Treasure of the Sierra Madre and Casablanca, and then maybe also the Maltese. No, I don't think I got the Maltese Falcon. Anyway, all those scores were in my ears and things I could look at, and then I also got had some Ellington arrangements that I would sort of refer to, and that was sort of there were really 3 posts. There was the Hollywood classic score music, the indigenous music, and then the third was kind of what I brought to the table, which was this love of swing, and that was kind of the soup, the milieu that the music grew up in.
And then one surf piece with a theremin in it.
Pardon?
Then one surf piece with a theremin in it.
Right, one surf piece with it. That was actually not a theremin. That was a guy named Ralph Carney, who is a reed player for Tom Waits. And he makes some of his instruments, and that was something of his invention called the slide clarinet.
What? I always thought that was Nick Peck's theremin that he built or something like that.
Oh, no. Nick Peck did build a theremin, but we didn't use it for, no, this was it was a slide clarinet.
Did you actually use my brother's charanga?
I did.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did use that. Yeah, before it was like gonna fall apart, but yeah, I did.
My brother went down to Mexico and bought a charanga from a guy who hunted the armadillos down. By the way, charanga is made from armadillos. It sounds weird.
You can kind of imitate it with a mandolin, but you can't. And it has a very delicate sound.
It's a stringed instrument. In the back of it is the shell of an armadillo. And my brother's a vegetarian, and he's like, I tried to buy these charangas without armadillos on them, but they just don't sound right. So he bought this charanga from a guy who had hunted the armadillos with his dogs and made these instruments out of them. And he shipped that up. And I think that's the sound you hear when the installer starts up.
It is, in fact, yeah, it's the sound you hear when the installer starts, and it was. It's in the Mayan temple. It's in sort of all the Andean music. There's a little bit of charango. And another thing that we did early on in the process of making the score was it became pretty obvious that this was going to be a huge game. I mean, I had you had all this amazing art from these very different environments and a epic story, and so it was kind of hard to keep it all, frankly, in my head, and so we thought it'd be a good idea to actually have Tim talk about the game and then use that as a basis for scoring the game. And so all us guys in the sound department rounded up, we had a bongo player, and I think someone else was. Anyway, we set things up kind of like a bohemian nightclub from the 1950s in the recording room, and then Tim came in, and I would just ask him to tell me about every room in the game.
Wait, wasn't it like some interactive map on like HyperCard or something?
We actually turned this into software, which unfortunately the software runs on a
Mac Plus.
Yeah, exactly. And it was System 9, and I haven't been able to resurrect it. But
I actually have not ever heard this since like 1997.
Yeah, so here's like, let's see, Casino Interior.
About 10 people in it who are around these 3 roulette tables, and there should be some piped-in music of some kind, and
do you hear the bongos?
It's a much more bustling place. Some serious gambling going on, though. It's not like Vegas. It's more, Monte Carlo high roller people back here dressed up very fancy. The guy speaking French is spinning all the tables, and there's a booth, and in the booth sitting there is Chowchilla Charlie, who is.
So.
People say I mumble a lot, and I never believe them until I.
Believe it or not, I found this to be incredibly useful.
The bongos, without the bongos, it wouldn't make any sense at all, but with the bongos.
Outside the club, it's really just a shot of the awning with neon writing on it.
So we set up a little screen in the system that we had. Oh, yeah? It's still going. Oh, these iPad things, what in the world? Newfangled technology.
Give me a charanga.
So we set up a screen in the proprietary music system that we had to play the music in the game, which I composed for, where you could click on buttons in each representation of a room, and I could instantly hear Tim talking about it. So it would just get me right. I am composing for the casino interior or the festival or whatever, and I could just click on a button and hear Tim. It's instant Tim telling me what to do. It was awesome.
Oh man, how nice to have that. Constantly hearing my voice all the time.
Actually, that's you're very. I think you give people a lot of free reign, so I never felt like it was.
That's awesome.
So Matt, 15 years later, we're redoing it, we're remastering it. The game is knee-deep in production now. How's it going?
Wait, isn't Matt going to tell a story of what he was doing in 1998?
What were you doing in 1989, Matt? Yeah.
What's the question?
I wanted to hear a story of what you were doing in 1998, but we can skip that to Gio's question.
I was in art school at that time.
Art school.
Playing this game.
Nice. Playing the bongos.
Playing the bongos. It was art school. That's what we do.
Did you wear shades?
You gotta wear shades.
Stop interaction.
You gotta be cool like that.
I was actually just saying that now, we're knee-deep in production on Remastered, and I was wondering how it's going with the team at Double Fine.
Yeah, so we're still sorting through all the different archives, collecting all the source for the code and the full motion video and the audio tracks of the Pro Tools sessions. Just kind of getting a sense of what we have to work with, and then what we can do with those assets to bring, incorporate modern compression algorithms and modern controls, and retain the tank controls that we all love at the same time.
Not everybody can handle tank controls, but the elite players.
It was like the first thing that Tim told me. He's like, you need to, keep the tank controls in there, because that's the way it was meant to play.
As my mom says about certain striped slacks we see in pictures, they were very popular at the time.
So we're still almost done going through all the archives. It's just going through this really fascinating, because you see how much hard work went into the project and how much love went into it, and then you guys got pretty funny with your comments in the code late at night. So that's pretty funny. But yeah, so...
come back and fix this later.
There's a lot of that.
Take this comment out when you improve this code.
There was a lot of that. Please optimize. But we're at the point now where I'm working with Peter to figure out how we're going to do some of the kind of re-recordings of some of the audio, to do some of the music tracks over again, to punch up some of that stuff. You could probably speak to that.
We just had a big adventure retrieving the old sessions of the live players, because they were all backed up to DLT. I don't know if anybody knows what that is. But so there's this highly non-current format that we had to extract a bunch of data from, and it was a real nail biter, because all those performances were tucked away on these tapes. But we got them, thanks to a guy named Jory Prume, who's a genius who lives around my area, who just knows everything about everything technical. So we were able to get that data, and just going through it now and figuring out how we're going to make it better.
And I walked out of LucasArts the other day with a giant box that said Grim Fandango on the side, and I feel like I'm still... I better start running with this thing and wait for George Lucas to chase after me or something. But it's really cool, because we see all the different elements that went into the game, and there's so much work that went into making this game what it is, and so we want to make sure that we preserve as much of that and just create the ultimate version for the fans.
Yeah, just give me 1 second. We are going to start the Q&A in a couple of minutes, so if you have questions, there are 2 microphones in either aisle, so if anybody wants to start getting in line, we will start that in a few moments.
It's always embarrassing when you say, any questions, and no one moves at all or raises their hand. Then I'll have to tell some stories.
Go ahead, Peter.
Yeah, Matt brought up something that I discovered in my studio the other day. It was, now you remember when we were doing it way back when, that we didn't have Google search or any search engines, to help us with the visuals. This is when I had to go to the library. I still go to the library, but you go to the library and you purchase books and you make lots and lots of copies. Well, I discovered that I found my giant Grim Fandango binder that it was just chock full of Xerox copies of reference material. So if you guys need another thing designed, I know the source. And I was thinking, if there was another opportunity to design another room or whatever, I would have the original source where I would pull it from. I would not go on the internet and pull out a new reference material. I will, you know, do my best.
Young artists listen
take
to
it
Old
right
Man Chan,
out of there.
make your binders and keep
That's
them.
right.
Yeah.
That's right. Old school.
That's awesome.
And Matt, right, just to go back to the production question, game's up and running and playable?
The game is running currently on the PS4, the PC, and the Vita, and it's looking great. We're doing a whole new renderer for the game, and so you'll see it in kind of a modern look, but you know, it's still retaining the original game as much as possible. So you know, new high-res textures and that sort of thing. So it's really coming together really quickly.
And we're also besides the rendering stuff, we were taking the original textures of the game, because the backgrounds are always done at a higher resolution than the characters, and so the textures, especially on some of the characters, were a lot lower res than we'd like to see now. And so we're having a lot of some people from the Broken Age team are actually kind of I wouldn't say repainting, but they're up-resing the textures to look beautiful and to look good in 3D now. And it is kind of challenging, because sometimes we will come onto a piece like Salvador has that hat with that emblem on it, and it's only like 4 pixels, and we're like, what was that emblem supposed to be? Because we could totally paint it to look nice now, but what was that emblem on Sal's? I asked Peter, and he didn't remember. We're going to find the original concept art, and I'm sure
The thing is that Brandon seems to know everything about this game.
Yeah, Brandon.
And you know, Brandon Dillon is the tech director of this game, and he's so passionate about it. He knows more details than some of the people who worked on the game. So that's
he could probably put those 4 pixels into a tool that would spit it out. Yeah, the Lost Souls Alliance. What was the logo for that?
LSA, I guess.
Like an L and an S and a
A.
All right, correct. Mystery solved.
Yeah.
With that,
I'm just guessing.
With that, we should open the floor to some questions. So since I'm left-handed, let's start over here on the left with this guy right here.
Hi. What are you definitely missing that you'll have to recreate from scratch?
What? Well, besides the badge on Salvador's hat?
Yes.
And some of our hair. What are we definitely missing?
We're not definitely missing anything yet, because we're still going through the archives.
Well, I mean, we're just anything that we haven't found yet, we're still pretty determined to find.
Yeah.
If I have to track down every team member single-handedly, go to their house.
You'll do it.
I'll do it.
Absolutely. Over here.
Hi. Why did you all choose to remake Grim Fandango of all of the Lucas games that you worked on? And if the game does well, would there be interest in remastering or even just re-releasing some of the old Lucas games? Yeah.
That's a good question. Why did we pick Grim of all the old Lucas games to do? It really gets into some of the heroic negotiations that went into making this deal down there. Some of our friends from Sony and Disney are down there. Hi. Do you guys remember why we picked Grim? I think we would. That's a good question.
It was close to your heart.
Because there are a lot of games that we could go back and do that with. I think Grim was the one. It is definitely a project. I mean, they're all close to my heart, Gio.
I know.
Yeah.
But they all can't be your favorite.
And it was definitely one. You know, a lot of the games, a lot of the Scum games, you could play. There's sites that help you play the old Scum games, and this one was kind of Grim was kind of an oddball in that it was not made in the Scum engine, and so it was the one that just felt like it was the most lost to time that we could, pull up and play. That's a good question. I'm gonna think about that. Feel free to help out, you guys down there. You got a good answer? It was the one that we picked. I think, yeah, it's true. So I guess the answer is because we picked it.
We picked it, yeah.
And I just put my foot down until I got what I wanted. Yeah, that's why. But if, I mean, I would certainly love, and the team would love to revisit a lot of those games. And so as long as everyone in this room buys 10 copies of this game, that will definitely, make it more likely that we'll try it again. But I'm up to it. I'm into it. Ready?
Thank you.
You guys ready? Okay. Yeah.
Cool.
Thank you.
Back on the left.
Sure. So I saw in your video you were wearing the T-shirt from the latest Pixies tour. And Frank Black, when he was writing a lot of his music, he wrote it in Mexico, or it was based around his experiences in Mexico, not too unlike Grim Fandango. And I was wondering if you had an experience or you just kind of had a fascination with some of those elements that kind of brought that out in the game and gave you the idea?
I mean, like, why make a game about Mexican folklore in the first place? Is that kind of what you...
Sort of, like whether kind of you got bit by the bug and you thought it,
Yeah.
you know, was something you wanted to express creatively.
Yeah, I mean, it was, a lot of things take, maybe not one big flashing moment, but like a buildup over several years. And back when I was in college, I took a folklore class at Berkeley. There was an amazing class where we studied folklore from different cultures and riddles and stuff like that. And we had a whole section on the Day of the Dead. And I always liked that, the holiday of the Day of the Dead, because it was such a mix of, there's a sacred religious part of it that's very serious, and there's a very commercial part of it that's about tourism, and there's this aspect of that story I always tell about how, you know, there's this practice of putting bags of gold in the bodies of, in with the caskets of people when they're buried, so they have money to spend in the afterlife. But they'd also put one bag of gold on the chest and one hidden in the lining of the coffin, so it wouldn't get stolen in the afterlife. And I was kind of like, is there crime in the afterlife? Do you have to worry about that? And that made this, I like that. That's so amazing. I'm just interested in things that are not pure like that. They're like kind of corrupted, and that led into this connection between the Day of the Dead and film noir. And but that was kind of sitting in the back of my head for years. And I remember someone gave me a book of pictures of those little, they call them calaveras, or those little paper mache sculptures. They put them in dioramas in a little box of like a dentist, but he's a skeleton and he's taking out a tooth of a skeleton. Or there's my favorite one was a skeleton lady giving birth to a skeleton baby. It was really disturbing, but I was starting to collect these, and I had an impulse that a lot of the impulses for making games comes from for me, which is that I started to see this little living world, and I wanted to go into it. I wanted to just jump in and run around the streets where everyone was a skeleton, and so that's kind of how it started building up in my mind. It's always like an urge to see some sort of mysterious, like world that you can not go to in your life, but you can go to in a game.
I like to see it too. Thanks.
Thanks.
All right. First off, I wanted to say, Peter, thank you very much for making one of my absolute, yes, the Peter with a hat. Yes. Thank you for making one of my absolute favorite pieces of music, Manny and Meche, which is this beautiful violin and accordion piece that is just amazing. Now, for my actual question, so there's a lot of games, especially both from the point of view of re-releases of movies and from more recent games which have had commentary. And I'm curious if there's any possibility whatsoever that this remaster will happen to have the, you know, Tim and Peters and you know, a commentary on this, everything that we've talked about.
We just assume by the end of this talk everyone would be tired of hearing us talking, so we...
You already know that that's not exactly possible.
I don't think we can say much about specific features, but I would say we want to have a lot of special features on the game that you get, and we also love to talk also. Those are two facts I can give you. Yeah.
That's true. He does like to talk a lot.
You can kind of put A and B together.
Oh, I would never say that. No. But we want to have things that for people, if they want to dig deep into the production of the game and have that be part of the experience of playing the new edition.
Okay, cool. Thank you all very much.
Thanks for your question.
Yeah, so first of all, thanks guys so much for being here, and it's awesome hearing all these anecdotes from this game that absolutely blew my mind when I was like 5 years old. And I have like 20 questions that I'd love to ask, but I'm only going to ask like 19 today. Tim and Peter, if you could just pick out one of your most favorite shots from the environment, like which piece would you go with? And then Peter McConnell, I love your music. And I wanted to ask you if you could shed some light into, there was one piece, and unfortunately I can't remember the name of it, but it was during the cutscene transition when Manny is mopping the floor. And it absolutely blows my mind every time. And I was wondering if you could talk about that. And then finally, sorry, last question is, on the soundtrack to the game, which again is amazing, there were a few pieces of music which weren't included in it, like the Lighthouse theme, which is again super awesome. And I was wondering if you guys have plans to release a more full soundtrack with this game.
Let's write that down. We're writing that down.
Favorite scene?
No. You start about that transition scene.
That one's called Blue Hector, if I'm not mistaken. It's on the CD, but it's processed in that scene that you refer to sound like it's coming out of a radio, and it is sort of a reflection of is that Celso Flores mopping the floors? Do I remember that right? Yeah. Celso. Sorry. And yeah, that was all the pieces that say Hector in them are based on one theme, which is Hector's theme. And so one of the interesting things for me about, just if you don't mind my geeking out on this for a moment, for me about doing the jazz part of the score was to see basically how many times I could do this theme without it being recognizable. And so about half the CD has some version of the, Smooth Hector, Blue Hector, Hector Steps Out. They all have some hint of the same music in them. And the idea was that this guy is everywhere. He's got his fingers in everything. And even if you're in a, even if you're just in a diner, the mob runs it. And so there's a sort of a sinister element to it. And there's also kind of I just thought Hector was a really cool character, so I thought I'd like to sort of see him everywhere at the same time. And that's the one that has a really great trombone solo that's played by a guy named Danny Armstrong, who was a trombone player in a San Francisco band called the Red Hot Skillet Lickers. And they had a lot of great players. Bill Ortiz, the trumpet player, plays with Santana. He's been playing with them for a bunch of years. And anyway, there's some Ralph Carney, who I mentioned before. Anyway, a lot of great players. And that's a special one, though, that Blue Hector, because it's kind of sad, and Hector is sinister at the same time. So.
All right, Peter,
What's
Tim?
your favorite shot?
That's a tough one, really. That's really, really hard for me. But I think for me, it's the concept art of the vista of when Manny is lighting a cigarette, and I was trying to figure out where the cat races were going to be placed, where the ship was going to be placed, and where the city was going to be. And I remember doing that illustration. It took me about 2.5 days to do because it's a pretty good size. And it wasn't working. And I remember there was something about it that just didn't click, didn't work. It felt really flat. And I remember my wife coming in and looking over my shoulder as I was doing it, and she goes, "Yeah, it's not working." And it was because of the stars in the background, way, way off, were too bright. And the problem was it was flattening out the piece. And it was her suggestion to knock the stars back. So all I did was take a piece of Kleenex and smudged the background in it. And that's what I did. I just sent it away right after that. So that was my favorite piece. Yeah.
That is around the area that is also one of my favorites. And it's more like the moment where, in Rubikava, where you first run into Meche again, and you haven't seen her in a year, and she goes running off, or she's being taken to the ship. And the ship is always one of my favorite pieces of Peter's design, because it's like a ziggurat on a cruise liner. It doesn't get used a lot in the game, but you can make a whole game set on the ziggurat cruise liner, I always thought. And it's also this huge musical moment when it starts, and it's just like the thing's pulling out, and Manny's running, and he jumps for it, and just, that's always the favorite part of where all the music and the visuals and what's happening in the story came together. Like, it's one of my favorite scenes in the game. And the others is, I've always been really particular. I've always loved the meadow, which is really one of the greenhouse at the end of the game, because it's got this, it's just this crazy field of flowers, which is really morbid in the context of the game. And there's a scene where Manny chops the heads off all these flowers, and the flowers fly up, and it doesn't have a lot of buildings in it or anything, but it's always been one of my favorite shots in the game. And also, the setting of the meadow has one of the craziest musical pieces in it that was just like these two guys improvising, right?
Well, they were improvising on the Hector theme that I mentioned earlier.
God, you got a lot.
Really, really taking it out. Yeah, that was Hans.
What were those two instruments? It was like a bass,
cello, and contrabass clarinet.
Yeah.
Maybe Barry Skagg. Now I can't remember whether it was Bates Garner or Contrabase. Yeah, we're doing all that extended, wild Sonic stuff. That's Ralph Carney. He's amazing.
Yeah. We got time for one more quick question.
Guys. Sorry, everybody else.
Okay. Yeah. So, were there any scenes, characters, whatever that you had to cut out, the technical difficulties, time difficulties that you're planning on putting back in?
Oh yeah, we cut out a lot. Like some projects go late, and it happens. And then you also cut stuff in order to be just less late than normal. So that has definitely happened on every game. So that happened on Grim, and there was a design document that some people have seen where the full game was described in this design document, and you can see that a lot of year 3 was cut out because that's what we're working on. There was this. Bernard, the giant hamster, what was it? You remember that guy? Yeah. And there was a toad that was going to eat Bernard. I'm trying to remember. And also, my favorite character was the Dillipede. It was like an armadillo centipede that was going to be involved in the whole. Anyway, that got cut. There was a lot of stuff that got cut, and I don't mind talking about it now because it's so far in the past. But I was very hurt at the time that we had to cut that. It's like cutting, There was a lot of stuff cut, but in the end, usually when you're done, you look back at what's left, and there's a reason that you kept the stuff you kept because it was the most important stuff, and the thing holds together, and everything is tighter because of what you cut out. So I don't really regret it because I think we made the right choices. But thanks for asking about that painful memory. No, just kidding.
And with that, Matt, Pete, Peter, Tim, I'd like to thank you for taking time to share stories old and new about Grim Fandango, both the original and the remastered. And thank you guys for taking time out of your busy PAX schedule to join us. Enjoy the rest of the show.
Thanks for coming. Thank you very much.